Hey, family. Pray that you've had a great day. Thank you for uh, logging on tonight. I hope and trust that all is well with you and your families, your ministries, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, my friend and brother, Dr. Calvin McFadden of the C3 Church, is on. We are awaiting Dr. Emory Berry, who is transitioning from the airport to the rental car uh, facility. He flew in town for the Issachar conference. Uh, they're both actually board members on that particular conference, and so Dr. Berry is en route. Hopefully, he'll get on soon. But Dr. Mack and I will kick this thing off. One of the reasons, well, the reason why uh, I wanted to do this in talking with Mac and Emory is because um, this is what I hear often when it comes to uh, my particular ministry from pastors who have watched, who have stopped by. It it's always Jordan. I'm thinking about planning. Man, you've made that look easy, and I don't know if it's a compliment, but at the same time, I'm like, no, you got this thing
No, that's
real backwards, you know. But thank God for a good team and God's grace
mhm.
that makes it look easy in the public,
Right.
but it hadn't always been easy. Matt, can you speak to that?
Man, first of all, Pastor, thank you for having me to share your space tonight. I'm deeply honored and looking forward to the discussion and having Emory on when he gets to a safe location. But I tell you, Pastor, I hear that all the time, Jordan, especially, many people don't know, and I don't know if I've shared this with you or not, as one of my friends in the United Methodist Church. I started a church, the first African American United Methodist Church in Tallahassee, Florida, the state capital.
Uh,
And then when I ended up, that was for about 11 years. And then when I ended up leaving the denomination, I was born and raised United Methodist, and I left the denomination over some of the same stuff that they're dealing with now. Um, I started a church from that former United Methodist church, but we had been planning, similar to you, some of my, maybe not as similar, but some of my leaders and all, they knew that I was going to leave the denomination, and they had already vowed to go with me to start this new work. Long story short, by the time we left the United Methodist Church that one Sunday, and we were in our new spot and location the following Sunday, and I had so many of the brethren say, "Man, oh man, Doc, that was easy, man. You made it look seamless." And I said, "Doc, we were planning and praying behind the scenes." And I had one brother who actually left the AME Zion Church to start a church without even planning, because he thought that the way I did it was the way, at least the way he saw, as
yeah.
far as what he could see that I did it. That's what he was going to do. And he did that without any proper planning, didn't have anybody with him, without praying, in my opinion. And I think the church may have lasted 2 years. And
Wow.
so I use that as an analogy and an example to say, you know, I never wanted to wake up and say, especially in this latter case where I am now with Cornerstone, I didn't come to Texas to say, man, I'm going to start a church. I want to be the founding pastor. I didn't come here for that. Been there, done that. But when the Lord allowed me to navigate the circumstances of the ministry that I was serving at that time, and to end up where I am now, I know it has to be Him. But I'll tell anybody, caution anybody, don't do it thinking that you just want to be the founder, you want to be the person in charge, you want to be the last say so, you want to be whatever it very well might be. You got to make sure that this is led of the Lord, that you prayed about this, and that you're not trying to follow a William A. Jordan or Emory Berry or, God forbid, a Calvin McFadden.
And that's our theme tonight. Pray before you plant. Man, the Sunday. that I resigned my former assignment and we went live that night with the team, all the team members in our matching shirts, etc. The next Sunday we had our first service, and I was very surprised at the inboxes I got on social media that Monday and Tuesday from people who I was only acquainted with on social media,
Mhm.
asking for help, asking for advice. But probably over half of them, if not 90% of them, were angry
Mhm.
and they were hurt and mad and they were bitter
Yeah.
in their current assignments.
Yeah.
And I said to them, the difference is I'm not angry
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not bitter anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, and I said to them, you guys are trying to do this next week,
Mhm.
next in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
This has been a 13-month journey for my team and I.
My
And
goodness.
we just did not, first of all, to piggyback off what you said, it's funny because I told Pastor Andrew Berry, New Life Church in Texas City, I said, man, I said, Drew, that's, man, I'll never do that. I got mad respect for y'all, but you can put it on paper, Doc. That's something I'll never do because I had no intentions like you doing it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I was bothered with God that that He made me do it.
My goodness.
Yeah, I I
Same here.
was I was vexed with the Lord
Yeah.
because when I wanted to do it, when I was angry and mad, He wouldn't let me do it.
Lord have mercy.
And now that I'm in a decent place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, now you want to make me do it.
Right.
So yeah, that's a strange conundrum to be in.
Man.
But that's the issue. I think, they wanted to do it, but I'm like, there is a uh prayer time you have to be sure because
Mhm.
when you're in your feelings and you're angry and you're bitter at your current assignment or things aren't going your way, I told my church sometimes your feelings can sound like the voice of God when you're mad.
Oh, that's deep.
When you're in your feelings can actually sound like the voice of God because
Mhm.
you want God to co-sign
Yeah.
on what you want to do.
What you're feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know. And so uh it for me, I'm like, no, this ain't just overnight.
Yeah.
This is go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, Pastor, you mentioned about being angry. I wasn't angry necessarily, at least in my experience, with the church where I was. I was disappointed that things turned out the way they did. But I got to admit to you, Rev, I was a little angry and perturbed with God because I was like, I had served 10 years up in Massachusetts, St. John's Church there. I mean, really had an opportunity to
And it was
see
doing great.
great.
Let's add that part. You were
Man,
doing phenomenal.
had a wonderful ministry there,
And built the building.
and build a building, absolutely. And let me say they have a wonderful pastor there now that I love and support. He's doing a phenomenal job. But I wanted to return back down south, and I prayed about it, and the door opened. And so I said, Lord, now why you brought me all the way down to Texas and for this to happen? And I when the idea and the notion came into my mind about starting a church after prayer, I said, now when I started that first church in the United Methodist Church, I was 23 years old, had a lot of energy. Now I'm 50. At the time, I was 40 something years old.
Wow.
I said, Lord, I don't know about doing this. And I'm getting ready to turn 50. I don't have the energy, maybe not the longevity, but I did have more wisdom than I did when I was 23. But it's just not something I wanted to do. And it took me a minute to get over my attitude, if you will, with God, not over necessarily the notion of starting the church, but having gone through what I went through to start the church. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and but now, as we all can say, we look back on it and say, God, this is your thing, you're doing it. I mean, we know this is your plan, but sometimes the road to get there is a little uneven.
absolutely.
You're
Dr.
unsure.
Emory,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Emory Berry of the Favor Church of Atlanta, Georgia, has joined us. He's in transition from the airport to his hotel. Dr. Berry, man, thank you so much for logging in and being with us. Can you just give us a little insight into your experience?
Absolutely. Always good to be with you, the Reverend Dr. Jordan and the great Bishop McFadden. But I would say, yes, similarly to what I've heard already, you couldn't have paid me. I never had dreams or visions of being a church planter. And kind of like you all, the Lord had a very interesting route. I will say is that I definitely am utilizing muscles that I didn't even know I had. But I can tell you, but I sleep better than I've slept in years. And
Man.
similarly, one of the things that I've learned is so my process, like you all pastor traditional churches, as it relates to history, established building, um, you know, uh, reputation within the community. But the downside that comes with that, as you all know, is sometimes it's the baggage of history, people not wanting to change, and so that's
Wow,
probably
the baggage of history.
two. But if need be, I can elaborate on a great detail.
Wow. I mean, just that one statement, the baggage of history. That's a major gem because that's what keeps a lot of folks from prospering. The baggage of history.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's you mentioned something, man, Barry, that you sleep much better. Uh, interestingly enough, man, when I launched this church, uh, it was fun. That's crazy. I was in an unknown spot, unknown place, but I had no fear. I had no trepidation of doubt. I knew what I heard. I knew what God said, and God gave me. Now let me be really really clear, and I say this respectfully. The success and the launch of the launch of fellowship was because of the grace of God and a strong team.
Sure.
Yeah. Uh, I didn't do anything. I heard what the Lord said. I saw the vision and I cast the vision. And the team took the vision and worked it. And so my advice to any person who wants to launch a church or you've been called to do that, one thing you have to do, you have to be sure.
Absolutely.
You have to be sure. And when I say you have to be sure in front of your team. You cannot vacillate in front of your team.
Right.
You have to stand on what you heard and you have to lead with authority, with excitement, and even with the ability to bend and listen to your team who may have better concepts and ideas than you have and be okay with that.
And you
But if the
absolutely.
leader is unsure, then your team will be unsure.
My goodness. You said a mouthful there, Doc. Because if we're quitting every other day or we're not sure that this is what we need to be doing, that's the attitude that your
Absolutely.
people are going to have.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, that's
You
not
do
what
not
you
want
want.
that.
And when you
Yeah.
said that, Pastor Jordan, I still remember when you did your initial flyer. It was a picture of you and everyone on your team. I don't know if y'all remember that. It was about
Yes, sir.
6 or 7 people,
Mhm.
and I was watching you and Pastor McFadden from afar and taking some nuggets. You all were coaching me and didn't realize it, and so. But I think that to your point, you're only as good as your team. And I can remember in those early stages, there were some people who I probably would have initially brought along on the team. And as you mentioned, listening to those who are part of your team, it said, no, Pastor, there's some people you just got to leave behind for where you're trying to go. And and these are people who I had personal relationships with, not just ministry relationships with. But in order to propel the ministry forward, I had to be willing to recognize for what this new work that God was going to do, that there were some people who were not going to be able to make that leap. And so I just want to emphasize your point that you're right. You're only as good as your team. In fact, I'm actually in the car now with a portion of our team, as you all know, going to the IC3 conference. And but there were some who they as well had personal relationships with, but they knew for where we're trying to go. They said, Pastor, although we have a personal relationship with these people, there's some people who, for what the Lord is leading you to do, they won't make the shift.
Sitting in his office, one of the nuggets that still bless me today that Dr. Ralph West said to me is, William, everyone who starts with you won't finish with you, and you have to be okay with that.
Right.
You literally have to be
Right.
okay with those who will come but won't be committed. They'll come to be nosy, and then
Absolutely.
they'll move on.
Absolutely.
Now, it may hurt your
Yeah.
feelings,
And
but you have to release them
yes,
and be
sir.
okay with that. Because he said to me, some of the people who you think won't leave will be the ones who leave. And some of the
That's
people who
right.
you think won't stay will be totally committed to the kingdom, to the vision, and to you. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a pearl of wisdom that founders have to uh, be okay with. That team that you started with, man, some of them folk may drop off for various reasons. They aren't bad people. They just were there to help you get started.
Sure.
They weren't
My
there to
Lord.
help you propel you, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Now for
Yeah.
me, I told a friend of mine last week that sometimes you can be on the outside looking in and you think things are well. But like for us,
Mhm.
fellowship had a wonderful launch. Man, those first 5, 6 months, first 8 months, first year, bruh, brothers, it was high, but
Yeah.
you can't stay up there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stick to itness that we all must have is when we had to move from where we initially launched to Pastor Bolson's church, New Hope Church, we lost that momentum.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
lost people. We lost that momentum. It was still good for a season, but there was a time, brothers, and I can admit this okay, and be okay with it. Matt Barry, there were times, man, for months we had no visitors.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For months,
Yeah.
nobody joined church.
Absolutely.
And that was the
Yeah.
first time, Barry, I said, nah, I don't want to do this no more.
Yeah.
No, no, you ain't you didn't tell me this dry season was gonna come on because I'm on a
Lord
natural
have
high.
mercy.
Right.
And you take me from up
Yeah.
here to ground zero, and it's the same
Yeah.
music, it's the same preacher, different location.
Sure.
Yeah.
Case in point, we had 16 people join church in April. Man, one
My
year
Lord.
we ain't have 16 people join the whole year.
Right.
What? And especially if we've come from a church where it's vibrant and fruitful and growing, and then you come to a point where There's
bruh.
nothing on the vine
It
that that can mess with your
mess
ego,
with your
Doc.
ego, mess with your mind. And Barry, I remember, and maybe you can speak to this, Barry, if you've been here. I was literally in my office, doctor, tears running down my face, saying, "Man, I'm not doing this no more. I'm gonna get a job. Yeah,
Hey,
I'm going
Oh,
because this is. I mean, I'm preaching my tail off, and people are singing and serving, and nobody's showing up. And man, it's like literally
mhm.
God said to me in my whining moment. If I can't trust you in the desert,
uh-huh.
I can't trust you in Canaan.
My Lord, come on here,
And when you said that, I
come
think
on here.
it's powerful because you got to know that within yourself, and for who for all the church planners who are who are viewing and who view this later, like you got to know that you know that you know, and it's not going to be like you mentioned the glamorous high moments. But I think what I found too is that you also have to teach and train your members and your leaders as well. That these are natural rhythms. I never forget we were in a meeting and I had a member asking, said, "Well, Pastor, how come nobody's joining?" And so look, I can't do a stick up in the middle of church, and say, "Hey, give us all your money and walk down the aisle." Listen, the Lord has to move on. Those are those
Yeah,
seasons where you just have to
yeah,
forge ahead. But like you said, it's painful. You got as many questions as everybody else, but you got to know that you know. And I found that if you, by doing a lot of teaching and sharing what the rhythms are like of church planting, helps as well. Because the average person has never done anything from scratch. The average person never built a house from scratch. They never started a company from scratch. They never planted a garden, and we grew vegetables from scratch. You know what I mean? And so the whole
yeah,
idea of church planting is very foreign for the average person who's only knows walking to something that's already established and then either just being a worker bee or moving it to the next level. It's a very different thought process, not just for the planter, but for and Sam Chance, you mentioned Pastor West, who was very instrumental, I think, in all three of us launching. But Sam Chan asked me a question once. He asked me, "Are you entrepreneurial in your team? Are they entrepreneurial thinkers?" And that was a question I had never thought about because I never saw myself that way. And his thing was, if you don't have people who don't understand how to start things, who don't have the stamina, the perseverance, or even the understanding of starting from scratch, he says it's going to be a rougher road than it has to be.
Yeah,
yeah. Absolutely.
And
yeah,
so,
And two things that I'll say to that. To your point, Dr. Berry, one of the things I had to start working with my people on is the folks who came with me. Um, I think it was their thought there was just going to be a
right,
continuation of where we were. And I had to teach them and still have to the dynamics of what it means to be a new church start, meaning that the slate is clean. We don't have we what's the seven words, we've always done it that way or whatever. We don't have any of that to contend with, but it also means that we can't be lax in who we are, because we're no longer who we were. We're something new. We're a new congregation. We're a new group of people, and a new ministry. And so we really have to continually teach people about what it means to be a new church start. But getting back, I see one of Apollonia was one of my members way down in Tallahassee, Florida, and she said something that was so right, that many of the people that we start out with won't end up with us. And Dr. Jordan, you even mentioned that, as Dr. Ralph West said to me, some of the people won't end up with you. Man, I don't know if you all know this. I know you know, Jordan, but I'm not sure Barry knows. I had a Negro to start a church within my new
no, I
church
did
start.
not know that.
We weren't even there 6 months. And this boy, I'm sorry, this young man and a group of people, um, they started a church. And interestingly enough, that church is no longer in existence. So it goes to show you that you got to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, that God is in it. Because if he's not, then it won't
and
last.
one of the reasons is because sometimes people try to bring Egypt to Canaan. You know,
There you go.
we're different for a reason. You know, and
Yeah.
I'll say this too. What I've had to help my team with gradually is that it's okay for the team to have conflict with personalities. Because here's the thing, everybody sees church different and how we need to do this and do that. It doesn't mean if I see something different than the way you see it that I love the church more or less than you do. You know,
Yeah.
because my team, they had some conflict, just clashes, man. You know, personality
Yeah.
clashes. One see it this way, one see it this way, one want to do it this way, one want to do it this way. And at the end of the day, here's the whole thing. We all love fellowship. Now, we just have to find a way to cohesively accomplish this goal. You know, it doesn't mean that one loves it more, one loves it less. And I think
Right.
too is that when to Barry's point, when you're a new church, you have to give yourself room to grow and make mistakes.
Yeah.
You literally have to watch
Yeah.
this grow and find your own rhythm,
Right.
find your own
Yeah.
placement. That as much as I love and respect Dr. Rev. Douglas West, who gave me great wisdom and advice, I don't want to be Brooke Hollow. As much
Right.
as I love Cosby, who's been so gracious to me as a friend and sowing into this church, I don't want to be Willie Avenue. Keon
Yeah.
Henderson is my guy. Love him to death. He blessed us financially. They all did. But I'm not trying to be Lighthouse. And so what happens is that sometimes people see other churches doing stuff. Man, we need to do it like Lighthouse. Well, you need to go join Lighthouse.
That's right.
Right.
You know, well, man, Lakewood, I'm not Joel. I'm not trying to be Joel.
Me.
Give this young ministry time to evolve and find our way and our niche at being fellowship. Be-
Yeah.
and here's the reason why.
Absolutely.
Just because that's working for Keon at Lighthouse, don't mean it's gonna work for Fellowship William Jordan.
That's right.
Because it's work and we all know pastors, y'all can speak to this, who've changed mid-flight because they saw one of their heroes doing something, brought it back to their church,
Yes.
and it all died.
Lord have mercy.
It's funny when you said that, with all of us having, pastor, large established churches, and as, Max shared being, in his 20s when he planted his first church being versus 50, you look at a lot of the younger contemporary, their fitted jeans and fitted shirts, what I mean? That day is gone, that day behind, I'm not getting, and
Man.
just because that's what works down the street, and I actually had a conversation with someone close to me, who was they because of the algorithms, there's certain faces that they see often and say, hey, have you considered doing what they do? I said, no, that's what they do over there. Over here, this is what we do. And I think, and it doesn't mean that you're inflexible, but knowing your identity. And so it's kind
Absolutely.
of like, it's kind of like with a tire. There's some people who, because that's the trend, they want to do it everybody, and everything don't fit on everybody the same way.
It doesn't. It's almost like Elliot Ivy said one time we were out, and this heavy set dude had on some skinny jeans, and Ivy said, "Now see, sometimes you gotta learn how to dress fat appropriate."
Right.
That's
Yeah, yeah. Them skinny jeans ain't for you, Doc. Yeah, you in
not
a
at all.
52, but you wearing skinny jeans. Doc, that ain't that. It's not appropriate for you.
That ain't gonna
Likewise,
work.
just because some other ministry or preacher is doing something, we all have our own identities,
Yeah.
and sometimes church people pass dress like this, pass do this. That ain't who I am, and you're not gonna force me into being uncomfortable because guess what? At the end of the day, let's be real. Lives are changed because of the gospel we preach.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's right. That's
When they tore the roof off at the house and lowered homeboy down in the presence of Jesus, the house was full because the power and presence of Christ was there who was teaching.
that's right.
And you can have all of the plans and you can do all this stuff. You can be in jeans, you can be in t-shirts, you can be in suits and ties, you can have greeters and ushers, folk outside with signs. But if Jesus ain't there,
Right. My.
He's the main
it's
attraction.
a casual gathering.
That's right.
You know, I saw something recently, and I told Dana who does our flyers, uh, like stop putting my face on everything,
Mhm.
you know, because I never want after listening to uh, uh, Justin Lester on flyers, etc., and the evolution of flyers and how sometimes you can put the pastor's face up there so much until he or she becomes the actual face of the church. And I told her I want God to be the face of the church.
Yeah,
You
Right.
know, put the people on the flyer sometimes.
yeah,
Right.
You know, because I don't because fellowship is bigger than me.
yeah.
Right.
You know, but back to my initial point, what works down the street ain't gonna work here. And you got to be your authentic, and you have to give yourself time, your team, your membership, your leadership. We have to give ourselves time to grow and to evolve based upon who God wants us to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can mimic other ministries and other pastors, and you can kill yourself.
Right.
And to be like them. Absolutely. And I love, I see Pastor Lewis, Andre Lewis on it. He said, church's identity is birthed out of the culture that they create. And I think
Absolutely,
that is so true. You know, people will know who you are based upon the culture that is in that place. They will know if you're a loving church if you show love.
Right.
There's some places you all know you go and you're like, Lord, these people are deader than dead, and they don't show anybody any kind of love, no kind of greeting whatsoever. They got greeters at the door, but they ain't greet nobody. And not even welcoming anybody, ushers, sit there and all that. No, it's what you do on the inside that ultimately determines who you're going to be to the outside.
absolutely.
And I do think I don't want, I certainly don't want my church to it always to be Pastor McFadden, but I do want to exemplify what I'm trying to get them to do and to be.
Sure.
You have to have structure.
Absolutely, got to have structure, and I want them also to know when I'm, you know, uh, before worship or even in other settings, I'm cordial. I'm greeting people, showing love, trying to get to know people. I want to exemplify that because that's what I want you all to do. Because I have to force sometimes people because you'll say, well. We started singing this welcome song that I had written actually 20 some years ago that I used to sing at my former church, and so we learned it here. And you're supposed to stand up and shake somebody's hand and show some love. And I got some folk, they just sit there like I'm a tree planted by the rivers of water, and I should not be moved. And so I finally had to say, listen, everybody stand. Come on, everybody stand. And let's shake the person's hand in front of you, shake the person's hand behind you, do at least shake somebody's hand and
Sure.
smile with all of your teeth, whether you bought them or you were born with them. Show somebody a smile, show some love, because that's what we're supposed to do. And that's the culture that we want to create. I get on my soapbox about that because I don't want to become what we left.
Absolutely.
And I think, two points, the two words that keep coming up a lot is culture and identity. And as you mentioned, one of the beauties of a church plant is that you get to create the culture versus inheriting a culture. And so and I think that is so key for church plants to not miss those moments to create the culture. And as you all, as we know, as leaders, what you make important is what becomes important. And so when you all talked a little bit about identity, I want to go back to worship, as for example. So I know that we live in this time where we got to feed the whole house. Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And so I think it's important to have a diversity types of worship. But again, I know that, so I just use for an example, CCM is real popular. You know what I mean, in many settings and contexts. And I would say that if that is what Lord is leading that church to do, that's the direction to go. But take for instance, if you are contemporary, be that. Don't try. Um, Similarly with I know one of the popular things is the if as you mentioned others, if the style is walking around with a Bible in your hand, that's the contemporary thing. But if you flat-footed, at your lectern, do that, because one thing is that people can pick up on the authenticity, and you'll always be tracing trends. If you're not clear on who you all are as a church, and I think that's so important. Culture identity. One more thing that we talked about that I think also is important for people to hear is administration and organizational management. For those of you all who know Pastor Jordan, Pastor McFadden, these guys are strategic masterminds. And of course, you all may see their reels for their preaching and teaching, but these guys are strategists par excellence. And I think that's important too for that person who just wants to, who is considering and thinking through. There's a lot of planning, a lot of effort, a lot of strategy, a lot of systems and processes that have to be developed, and you're always developing them. And that's something I just really want to stress, because many people say, well, I know I know a few people who can sing well, and I can preach, and let's start a work. Listen, that is an important part of what you do, but probably about a fraction of what you're going to end up doing.
And again, I think that goes back to team,
Yeah.
Right.
because I mentioned earlier, I I hear God, I can see it, and I can verbalize it. But here is where I'm weak. I'm weak logistically, but I have an executive pastor who is meticulous when it comes to logistics. I have a COO, a CFO, and people on my team who can take it and make it happen. And I think back to what Barry said, sometimes too, Barry, pastors have to also admit where they're weak at.
My Lord.
Absolutely.
And then surround yourself with people who can get it done, and you trust them to do it.
Trust. Trust.
Because here's the whole thing. If I have to keep emailing you, if I have to keep texting you and calling you, I don't need you around me.
Hmm.
I need to be able to say, hey, this is what I want from A to Z. Now, one of the issues I had in the beginning was on some things I wasn't clear. And then when certain leaders made certain mistakes, I really could not, I guess, punish, chastise, or whatever, because I wasn't clear. So the leadership, you have to be clear. Pastor Lewis says, can you share how important it is to build relationships outside of your ministry context?
Well, I would tell you that I think that's absolutely important, and I've tried to do that most of my ministry. And the reason I say that is because most of the guys that I am closest to or have been friends with, most of them have been Baptists. Well, I was born and raised United Methodist, and I have very good friends who are AME and still United Methodist and Kojic, and to me, it never was about denomination, but if we have the same language, the same context, the same vision for ministry, I think to be in ministry together with persons outside of our denomination or outside of our sphere is absolutely important, particularly even with pastors of a different hue, to
Mhm.
support our work, to support vision, to have as accountability partners. And I know that there are pastors that I can name within um, a different context than my locale that I can call on to offer guidance, prayer, and support. I'll just lastly say this, and I think you alluded to it earlier, Pastor Jordan, that Cornerstone is who it is now because of pastors who supported our work, who invested in our work, who may not necessarily be Baptist or may not necessarily be in the city, may not necessarily know exactly the vision that we had, but they trusted the work that we had developed and the friendship that we have. So I think that pays off. Um, because if you're going to stick with somebody just your immediate context, you're going to find yourself many times disappointed because some people in your immediate context are there as long as they can use you, and they're jealous of the work that you're doing. So you need some people who will support the work otherwise.
Absolutely.
If I may add to that, and so as you all know, sometimes I can come across very polished, but every now and then it's good to be messy. So I'm gonna be messy just for a second, and I think there's something that both of you all have said is that it's impossible to do the work by yourself. There are a lot of people who help you, and I know that there are a couple of people, and I'm a be controversial who give the illusion that they did it all on their own, that there was no one. And when you really learn the backstory, say, come on now. You've never once admitted that you were able to get this done because of relationship and partnerships. You know what I mean? And people who sold into the work. So I say all that to say is that that is very interesting that there are some who um, profess and project that they did it. You know, just the Lord just smiled out of no. There were a lot of people who helped you, and they don't give credit. And so I'll
Call
just leave
the
it
name,
like
Trevor. Call the name.
Dre,
that. And listen,
Dr. Andre Lewis talking about be messy, be messy.
and Dre, I know you would love it, but I'm not gonna do that today. But y'all know
We'll,
what I'm
we'll,
talking
we'll do
about.
that. We'll do that later in fellowship this week.
That's right.
And there were people when I did this work, man, there were people who sent me money I've never met
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and literally had no relationship with.
Right.
And there were people in the city who I had relationship with didn't send me a dime.
Hello.
And there were some, who just said, "Hey, man, I believe it. I want to help."
Yeah.
You know, Marcus Cosby was probably one of the first.
Yeah.
Byron Stevenson, Dr. Andre Lewis,
Absolute ditto.
Charles Bond, other guys, and 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 I was just amazed at even when I got the building.
Mm-hmm.
People. Keon Henderson called me and say, "Hey, man, what do you need?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, Cosby was supposed to preach our dedication service, and you ended up preaching because he was sick.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Uh, he called me and said, "Hey, man, this is what I'm sending you." And so again, man, and two, let me be messy because I'm since they want to be messy, I can do that. Uh, some Negroes, man, literally just sit back waiting for you to die
Oh Lord.
and fail.
Oh Lord.
I mean, there were people uh, who I have not talked to in 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I reached out last to them,
Yeah.
called, text, ain't heard nothing from them, and didn't offer any area of support financially, a prayer, anything else. But then when we get this building, all of a sudden, hey Doc, man, I knew Bob been praying for you, and man, I was like, man, go to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go to hell, stay there, and sit down for a while. And stay over there and
Yeah,
keep the same non-supportive energy you had the last 3 years.
absolutely.
Because I saw the text messages in the
Absolutely.
group chat. I saw it because the people that you were talking to, one of them Negroes wasn't loyal to you,
Yep.
and they sent it to me.
Yep.
So no, you weren't praying. You weren't praying. You probably were. You were praying, but in the wrong in the wrong with the E, not a Y. I
Lord
mean, an
have
E, not an
mercy.
A.
Yeah.
You know, and so and I'm like, and it was always what got me McFadden is it was always people who had more than me.
Absolutely.
Like you got a building,
Yeah.
you got more people, and one guy sent a message about, he all right, but he never show his crowd. Well, my message to him was worry about why you went from two services to one.
Lord have mercy.
That should be your objective and worry, not what's happening over here.
That's right.
Why you going from two to one?
Right.
And you can't say COVID because Andre Lewis got Nick Rosen in the parking lot at
Listen,
New
you hear what
Faith
I'm saying?
in the hallway. My pastor Tim Sloan got folk in the lobby. Marcus Cosby got folk. Hell, he got folk everywhere.
Yeah,
He got folk.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
So
Doug, you'd be
yeah,
surprised when if you go back, and I don't do this regularly, but my media person,
yeah.
my,
I sure cuss, Dre. You know me well, Doc.
yes, my media person said, "Well, do you sometimes, Pastor, go and look and see who's watched us on Facebook? Because it will show you somebody's joined and all that kind of stuff." And I'm shocked at the number of people, particularly from where I came from here in town, watch, and then the Negroes who have been talking about me that they don't know that I know they've been talking about me, and I mean I've seen it in plain form.
Watch,
They're
Doc. They
watching,
watching. They
and I'm like,
watching.
if you don't like me, Doc, what the hell you watching me for? But they're trying to see um, what we got going on over here, trying to see what if they can make an assessment of our demise. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and that's why I'm always saying, listen, the best is yet to come, because
Absolutely.
we ain't we here to stay.
Guess what? They're watching and they're also low key learning, but they'll
Yeah,
never admit that.
you darn sure right about it,
You know. But this journey is interesting.
man.
I thank God for it. Now, you
Now,
know, the ups, the highs, and the lows. I don't want to keep y'all all night, but um, what wisdom and advice that each of you can impart to some person who is potentially praying about starting a church? What wisdom and advice as we back out of this tonight?
Sure. Well, I think I say, Pastor Jordan, the way that you titled and tagged today's podcast is premier. You gotta pray. You gotta seek the face of God. It cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. But the advice I would give is talking to church planters. And so one of the things that I did that it's like a kid who wants to be a doctor or an attorney or whatever the case may be. You may only see what you know on TV with Bill Cosby and the Cosby Show or Matlock, but there's a whole undercurrent, a whole nother side to it. And so one of the things I did is I sat down with Cynthia Hale for hours, sat
Mm,
down with Kerwin Lee, for hours, and they literally gave me, if you will, Kerwin gave me every sermon, every Bible study he preached and taught for the first year. I literally traveled. I went out of state, met with people for hours, and I would say sit down so that you have a full understanding of what you are potentially uh, embarking on.
man, that's good.
Dr. Matt?
You know, uh, Pastor, uh, Pastor Jordan, I want to say, man, thank you for really bringing us together, because I think this is a worthy conversation. I want to lift up the pastors and other folks on here that have been supportive of us, and you certainly know who you are. But I also want to lift up pastors that I know who are on here tonight who have started their work or planning to start their work. I see Chad Rankin and Trey Davis, and some others.
Chad has a great church down in
Oh
Texas.
man, doing
Great
wonderful.
church, great guy.
And I thank God for them because they're in the journey along. Bishop Victor T. Curry down in Miami, he used to call it fellow sufferers of the gospel. There are fellow sufferers of the gospel, but we pray that they're doing that. God continues to bless their ministry. But I would say this, and again, as Barry mentioned, the tagline says it all. Pray before you plant. Make sure
Yeah.
that this is what God is leading you to do. And I'll even add another piece to this that we haven't talked about tonight, and maybe we can continue this discussion later. Make sure that if you're going to start a work, that your family is with you 100%, because you cannot do the work if you got folk mad that you started a church. Don't they want some of the attention but don't want the work. And I've seen that happen with some pastors, and their spouses were not on board, because people got to realize that many times when you have started a church, you got to help the church financially sometimes before the church can help you financially, which means
Yeah.
take some of the resources away from home. So pray, seek God's face, get wise counsel, make sure your family is still engaged and involved and they support the work, and then just watch and see what God does. And I think you're going to be amazed at the things that will come as a result of you being obedient to the Lord.
Absolutely. Man, thank y'all so much. I appreciate you. It's been a great evening. Thank you all for watching.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, sometime soon we can do this again.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
listen. Yeah, that's the advice they both gave us.
Yeah.
Listen. You have to have someone you listen to. And thank God for people who pour into you genuinely. Again, I appreciate each of you. To the members of fellowship, team, and staff, I love you. Thank you so much for being who you are and for working in excellence through the ebb and flow of ministry. Dr. Berry, Dr. McFadden, thank you all so much for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your experiences. It ain't for the faint of heart. You have to know that you know, again, that you know. Again, guys, thank you for being with us. Chad Rankin, love you, man. Great work in Texas City.
Absolutely.
Great guy. Um, Trey Davis, we're praying for you. We'll be getting with you soon, Doc, to help you with your journey. You all have a great night and be safe out there. Peace.
Thank you, Paz.